I'm Andy Agafangelo, the founder of Transparency Task Force. We are a UK-based certified social enterprise, which simply means that we operate as a not-for-profit, and our purpose is to help make the world a better place, not to make money. We are international. We have people who pay attention to our work in 20 countries around the world, and for reasons that are directly relevant to what we'll be discussing with Mattie McGrath TD today, TTF, Transparency Task Force, got very, very heavily involved with the issues relating to Ireland from 2023 onwards. In fact, what I'm going to do, we invite Mattie to start sharing his own thoughts. I'm going to take you folks back to something that really did grab my attention back in 2023. And to help me bring this point to life, I'm going to be sharing my screen and showing you a post on the LinkedIn profile of Seamus May. Seamus, many of you will know Seamus is a very, an absolutely superb representative of the concerns people have about the way that Ireland is falling into, well, some would say, a state of corruption in relation to aspects of its housing system and its mortgage system, etc. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen, folks, and just take you to this particular post. So you'll see here on my screen, ladies and gentlemen, it's titled "Ireland: Explosive Allegations of Systematic Fraud Unearthed in Land Registry and Courts." That was the title of the letter. We're looking at Seamus May's LinkedIn post back in 2023. And what Seamus did, quite rightly so, is he published the letter in full. I'm going to read it out. So, Mattie McGrath TD, leader of the Rural Independent Group of TDs, has made shocking revelations regarding what he believes to be systematic fraud within the land registry and the Irish courts. These allegations, including perjury, misrepresentation, and a conspiracy to defraud Irish citizens of their homes, farms, and properties, have come to light through a series of comprehensive documents prepared by Edmund Honeyhan, the Master of the High Court, and was addressed to all TDs and senators. Deputy McGrath has himself reached out to all TDs and senators, highlighting the serious issues at hand. Addressing these concerns, Deputy McGrath stated from Leinster House, "This new documented evidence brings to light a far-reaching fraudulent scheme involving perjury, misrepresentation, and a conspiracy to defraud Irish citizens of their homes, farms, and properties." Honeyhan, a highly respected expert in this field, indicates that the courts are consistently deceived by the presentation of land registry folios with misleading mortgage ownership information falsely presented as conclusive evidence. The information revealed suggests that the entities known as credit servicers, often referred to as vulture funds, may not actually possess ownership of the mortgages despite being registered as such. This fraudulent practice raises significant concerns affecting tens of thousands of distressed borrowers, including those with business properties, farms, and family homes. In light of these grave revelations, I have written to all fellow TDs, urging them to share this documentation and to share it with their affected constituents, numbering in the tens of thousands. Many of these individuals are entangled with vulture funds and face challenges with the judicial system. Sharing this information is a means to empower affected citizens, especially those without legal representation, to assert their rights, which are protected under EU and Irish law. In response to these concerning findings, I am calling on members of the Oireachtas to unite across party lines and strongly urge the Minister for Justice and the Minister for Finance to promptly address the ongoing criminal acts. I am also demanding an immediate halt to this activity pending a comprehensive investigation by various arms of the state, including the Gardaí, the Corporate Enforcement Authority, the Land Registry, and the Oireachtas Joint Committee on Finance. I cannot emphasise the urgency of the situation enough, and I appeal to my colleagues in the Oireachtas to give this critical matter their immediate attention, concluded Deputy McGrath. Ladies and gentlemen, that letter could not have been any more powerful or any more brilliant than it was. Before we invite Mattie McGrath to share why he felt so strongly about those issues, can we please show our appreciation not only to what he did then, but what he has continued to do since? Thank you very much indeed, Mattie. Well done. And thank you, sir, for being with us today. Mattie McGrath, over to you. I would love you to tell us about why these issues are of such great concern to you, how these issues are affecting your constituents, and please do tell us whatever you'd like to that relates to what has happened since that October 23 letter. Thank you very much, Mattie. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
I'm delighted for the opportunity, and thank you very much for inviting me. And at the very outset, my heart is so sad today to think that at this particular point in time, a father, a husband, a farmer in Wexford, Carlow, Wexford border, he's been laid to rest because of the activities of vulture funds that he ended his life last Friday because of his land being put up for sale. And he's only one of so many, but my heart is sank in my heart. I've met him in a number of meetings down in Carlow, Wexford border back some years ago. There were a group there fighting this situation, but he had no more fight in him. They put it on Wilson's for sale last week, and he just couldn't handle it. A poor man, and my thoughts are with him and countless other families. And his wife now and children left to pick up the mess. Wilson's have withdrawn it presently after this horrific incident. But look, we need to take action, and we will be taking action later on when the Dáil resumes about this situation. But there are countless persons and families destroyed by the vultures. And a word shocks me when I think to Michael Noonan back in the day when he was Minister for Finance. You know, he said they were necessary, the vulture funds were necessary, and that they were needed. And I couldn't believe that any Minister for Finance or any Irish elected representative would say that. We've fought oppression here for centuries, and to have this lawlessness going on. So back to the letter. Yes, I couldn't do the letter, but for the excellent help of Brian and indeed Ed Honan and indeed McDonald report them later. But I couldn't, and I salute Edmund Honan and Theo McDonald and everybody just fighting with this. But there just seems to be a disparate group that are not able to be focused. And you take the letter, for instance, that went to every Oireachtas member, and maybe 3 or 4 of them at most mentioned it to me in passing, but nobody put pen to paper or typed the letter or took any action other than that. So everyone seems to be paralysed, or else they don't want to do it, or else they're, I hate saying complicit, but they seem to be happy with the situation. And I was never more shocked when I saw the same government elected again last year in the election. So return I thought that people would have found out, but the media are no help to us whatsoever, you know. And it's just so sad. But we can't give up the fight because of that poor gentleman today and the many others who've gone to their reward, and we must, in their name, these people have blood on their hands, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with it.
Mattie, thank you very much indeed. There are so many important talking points here. You've touched on the fragmented nature of the activity in your parliament about these issues. You've touched on the media and the general lack of reporting. There are many other issues we'll take the conversation to as well. If I may ask you, Mattie, why is there what seems like a strange unwillingness to act when we have so many people in Ireland affected by the vulture funds in the way that they are, but their concerns are not seemingly represented by a critical mass of politicians in Ireland? What is causing that disconnect, if you like?
I wouldn't say, I'm in the Dáil 18 years, I wouldn't say this was raised any more than 20 times by the whole Dáil in that time. So I do know that in Fine Gael government back after the crash, and Michael Noonan instructed his TDs not to come near me with any of these families. Many of them came to me, and that's the way it has continued. And the system is so corrupt, as Seamus May pointed out. I'm pointing out. We failed here, completely failed in Ireland to assert our independence. We've been hijacked literally by big business, and in this case, the vultures. They are also such an important part to tell us of the housing regeneration, but sure, nothing is changing. The figures of homeless are growing. I met a man about 40 minutes ago in a rural town in Carrick-on-Suir, just approached me on the street. He's been evicted after 18 years in his house next Friday, tomorrow week, or this Friday week. And, it's on and on, it's going, and worse it's getting. And there's an awful lot of greed involved. Greedy landlords, greedy these companies, these, big entities. And we did take action before the new land league that was set up by Jerry Beats and others and Brian. And we did take action and stopped some of these properties being sold. But other than that, I said it's a disparate action. There's no talk about it in the Parliament. The media won't engage in it, bar one or two independent productions, and they're frightened. And it goes on then an underbelly here with devastating consequences, for generational families and for communities. And like today, and it's just ongoing, and it hasn't got it's not getting any better. And I do value Edmund Horan's interaction, and he was at the very basis of the master of settlements and the taxi master, and trying to uh, he saw it firsthand, and he showed compassion, but very, very few of the judiciary, very few if any, seem to have empathy here. And we do know that some of the judiciary had huge borrowings as well, and they got well looked after themselves. We do know also of cases where the case is being held, and justice had to be removed, had to be forced off the bench by lay litigants because they had a invested interest with the banks that were taking the cases. It wouldn't happen. It's total lawlessness, and it wouldn't happen in any functioning democracy. It wouldn't happen.
Thank you, Mattie. There's a phrase I used a few weeks ago when I had the wonderful opportunity to speak to Eddie Hobbs. The phrase I used was the unholy trinity, and in this context, what you've said to me so far, Mattie, makes me think of a different version of the unholy trinity. We've got three major bits of our system, it would seem, failing to work. First of all, we've got the failure of the Irish Parliament to adequately represent the interests of the people. Secondly, we've got the failure of the media to adequately talk about and expose what's been going on. And thirdly, we have the failure of the judicial system to ensure that justice happens in keeping with the law of the land. We've got the three things there, all failing. Let's go into each of those a little bit further, if I may, Mattie. So, in terms of your parliamentary democracy, it's probably no different to ours in the UK, in the sense that more and more people are becoming increasingly concerned about how parties are being funded and how electoral donations, corporate support, corporate sponsorship affects what's going on. Do you have anything to tell us, Mattie, about your perceptions on that? I mean, just your general feel about whether this sort of thing is an issue for you in Ireland.
I do. I can go back to when I was a young man. I think I was driving, just about 17, and PMPA, which was a massive insurance company, and they went belly up, and the government bailed them out. And a levy was put on the insurance for all insured persons, no matter what, from a motorbike to a lorry, everything. And that levy was temporary, but it was never lifted. So the government think that, and this has happened a couple of times since the bailout. Like, I've refused to vote for the so-called bailout. I did vote for the financial guarantee, and I shouldn't have. It's my one big regret. But when I saw the bailout, we were charged, we were charged 6% by the EU. People who the bondholders literally who'd shoved in all the money in here. They had insurance cover. They were left off scot free, and we got money from the IMF for less than 3%. But the public had to pay 69 billion or whatever. The public been asked to pay the whole time. The other hand, then we have big business. That's why I mentioned the PMPA. He became close to a political party. The owners there were close. We see companies like CRH, that Seamus May has battled with for decades, and many other small businesses throughout the country, a number in my own area, who were literally gobbled up by them and Monopoly. And the man I admired for years was Sean Quinn. He took them on as regards, not having a monopoly in the cement business. That's another story. But, big business here literally are, in spite of all the regulations that are supposed to be there, I do my SIPO returns. Just as I sat down for this meeting, one of my girls in the office said there was an email in from SIPO. There's a Standards in Public Office Commission that I must reply to by August. I always do meticulously. My wife doesn't sleep over it. But they all have to do that, all the parties and individuals. But some of them are just, there's obviously ways around it because big business is intrinsically involved in pulling the strings and running the country. And many of those big businesses now are outside the country, outside the state. That is so sad. We talk about the money involved in American politics, but it's more subtle here and way more discreet, and it's happening. And everything that goes wrong, then the taxpayer is made pick up, be the patsy, pick up the tab. And I mean everything, literally everything that goes wrong. Take the mica scandal with defective blocks. Now, what did the government do? Put a levy on every meter of concrete that's been produced. For anybody who wants to build a house, it's affecting the building, the housing crisis a very big way. For anybody housing themselves, instead of making the companies that sold this faulty product and the lack of regulation, make them responsible. They're laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah. Wow, this is powerful stuff, Matty. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to share my screen again, folks, because the issues we're touching on right now, this failure of democracy, this decaying of democracy, this disconnect between the will of the people and what the parliamentarians are focusing on, is obviously a root cause of the reasons why the vulture funds have been able to get away with what they've been getting away with. I'm going to share my screen again, folks, because I'd like to show you this webpage. It's a webpage about a TED talk. Obviously, if you've never seen this before, I really do highly recommend it. Just Google TED Talk Seamus May, SEAMUSMAYE. And the title of the talk is Ireland, a Democracy or Corpocracy. And Seamus's talk about Ireland being a corpocracy, not a democracy, speaks so well to the issues that Mattie McGrath has just been speaking about. Because if we have big business supporting politics, then it must follow that big business is influencing politics. And when it comes to big business, they don't get any bigger than the banks. I wonder how much influence the banks are having on the day-to-day running of politics, not just in Ireland, but also in the UK, also in the USA. This has surely got to be part of the problem. After Mattie's spoken a little bit more, we'll pass on the opportunity for others to chip into the comments here. We would love people to tell us about the extent to which you think there has been a decaying of democracy in Ireland and indeed elsewhere. Let's move from the first element of the unholy trinity to the second. You spoke about the media, Mattie. I guess these issues have got to be connected, because if big business can affect politicians, maybe big business can affect what editors want to write about in their newspapers and their magazines and on their TV channels and then on their radio stations. Mattie, what do you think about the state of the media in Ireland?
They shouldn't be called media because they're not, apart from a few independent publications, they're not media. They're not public service media because they're not telling the truth. I mean, I put on the record of the Dáil last Tuesday week at midnight, a whistleblower about the whole impacts and effects and what people knew about COVID and the medical people and the government and the health regulatory authorities, and not one word of it was printed in any media outlet or picked up anybody. That aside, here we have, so obviously, I've had some good journalists, and there are some good journalists. Don't get me wrong, and they do their best, but they failed. I've seen some very good stories, worked very hard on them. We're going to cover them. Ringing me up actually on a Saturday night, said, "Look, Matty, that's 6 o'clock. That's gone. That's going to be printed tomorrow in Sunday paper." Only to ring at 10 o'clock, that was pulled at editorial level because of direct influence of big business and big companies and powerful people that threaten litigation, but also, and then you know why then there's usually literally acres of advertising in those papers. So there's no independent regulator to monitor this because obviously people have to advertise, but it's just bias. I see that at a local level. I don't put ads in any papers for election, and the papers don't obviously cover me. Then after that, from election to election, that's their choice. And I suppose I say to myself, maybe I'm guilty myself of not, but I don't put ads in. That's my situation. But big business out of the media, we don't have an effective independent media here. RT is the worst. Take RTE, for instance. I'm on the Dáil and said I was on the communications committee for the last 5 years up till last November. And every year, RT were in trouble financially. And every year when the Dáil would rise for the summer recess, the Minister for Communications would always, announce maybe 50 million, maybe 70 million, maybe 100 million. And after all the scandals last year, and all went on and the inquiries, which we had no proper effective inquiry. But anyway, what did the Minister for Communications do this time last year? Just 2 weeks into recess, she gave them 726 million for 3 years. I couldn't believe it. I was weak at the knees after all the scandals that weren't dealt with. And this is what's wrong. I mean, they do the government bidding. The government pays them, literally, or taxpayers' money, and they are effectively a tool for the government. Full stop.
Wow. Again, this is really powerful stuff. As we're talking about the media, I'm going to spend the next few minutes with you, Matty, if I may, talking about the McDonald report. And again, to bring this to life, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show folks this page. This is the page on Theo McDonald's newsletter page. For those of you who need to find it online, just Google the McDonald report. And you'll see here a picture. This is Matty in September 2024, talking about the McDonald report. Now, the McDonald report, written by Theo McDonald, is a balanced, academically robust account of the housing crisis in Ireland. What are the underlying issues? What role do the vulture funds play? But more importantly, what needs to be done to actually fix the problem that exists? Again, I'm going to read part of this out, okay? So, referencing the McDonald report, Mattie McGrath TD for the Tipperary constituency has directly challenged the Irish government to explain what it is doing to deal with the housing problems created by vulture funds. Speaking to the Dáil yesterday, Thursday, 19th September 2024, he said, "I am glad that Minister Deputy O'Brien is here. I have just come from the audio-visual room where the McDonald report on housing and vulture funds was launched. I hope the Minister will be able to read it." Mr. Edmund Honohan, former Master of the High Court, Mr. Cormac Butler and others spoke. Critical, independent analysis was carried out, and not by NGOs. It is found, and Mr. Edmund Honohan pointed out also, that many areas of legislation are flouted and broken daily in regard to the land registry, the vulture funds in the courts, and the repossession of homes, farms, and property. It is outrageous the government is allowing this. Some judges, in fairness to them, are waking up to the fact the land registry papers that are being offered are totally invalid and fraudulent. The vulture funds do not have any access. They buy the keys for these properties and homes. but they have nothing else. They have no documentation. When is the government going to act? The minister should read the contents of this report. The problem with housing is not supply, but rather the government is allowing vulture funds and other people are allowed to break the law and victimise people and families. Deputy O'Brien confirmed he will review the report and reply. And there are various other comments from other people who attended the session, including, I'm very proud to say myself, the session in the AV room. Mattie, I'm kind of guessing here that you're a bit disappointed about the lack of follow through and action in your parliament after the McDonald report was published. What do you have to say to that, sir?
Absolutely no action, no reaction. Just they tried to pick holes in it. They tried to, undermine Edmund Honohan, but to just move on. The media won't pick them up on it. Obviously, he who pays the piper calls the tune, and it moves on. Like the McDonald report was a very refreshing document, very well researched and balanced. As I said, not done by an NGO. That's another big part of our problem. Is the NGOs here? We have 36,000 NGOs, all paid for by taxpayers' money, costing $6 billion a year, and they're literally framing government policy and dictating what's happening, and the public get no look in, no look in. So we're weak, we're very weak democracy, and here we are. The housing list grows exponentially, and people are being evicted from their houses, and we throw money at the problem and we don't have a clue. But I have come to the conclusion after my many years service now that we've had about 12, I think, housing ministers in the last 18 years. We definitely had 10, and they've all failed one after the other. And one thing that never changed is the Custom House. And I looked into this, and the Custom House is the Department of Housing. And that was demolished during the War of Independence. And I've said it'll have to be demolished again. And I don't want anybody to be hurt, but we have to have it. There's a deep malaise and rot in there of ineffective action and not having any vision. And we saw that a person came out of that office. He was there for a long, long time. He got himself appointed as a planning regulator. We did never have one in Ireland. And he went on a crusade of dezoning land in my own area here and all the different areas. And now with the government announcing yesterday in a big statement, on Tuesday, yesterday, that they're going to have to zone enough land to build whatever 70, is it 90,000 houses a year. The councils was the only function they had was the zoning of land, and they were dealing with that in most cases, 90% of cases, effectively. We had scandals in the past, but he just unilaterally got his office, got his breastplate into the wall, and went mad. And I said he should be sent out to Donald Trump. I said he should be sent out to Lebanon or someplace because he wasn't needed. We never had him. He created Bedlam. Now it's going to take a minimum of 6 to 12 months to change the plan to contravene him, to rezone land again. So why this man came from the ethos of the Custom House, and the ministers are coming and going, and we're not getting any breakthrough. So obviously, the policymakers and the people that are supposed to be implementing the policies and thinking about the policies, there's no visionaries in there. They're all just happy with what's going on, and all those things I can't say. But it's dysfunctional in the extreme.
Thank you. And we're going to turn now to the third element of the unholy trinity, the judiciary. And there's no better way, I think, to bring this point to life than to make direct reference to a recent article that appeared in the Irish Examiner. And well done, Irish Examiner, for publishing this piece, which is about some thoughts from Edmund Honohan, the Master of the High Court. I'm going to share my screen again here. So here's the item in question. The title, as you can see, folks, is "We Need to Keep Ireland's Land in Irish Hands." Ladies and gentlemen, before we do anything else, can we please applaud Edmund Honohan for writing it, and B, the Irish Examiner for publishing it, because that in and of itself is a bit of a breakthrough to actually get a paper to actually properly report something that's come from the Master of the High Court. We need to keep Ireland's land in Irish hands. He argues that if we want to keep our land in Irish sovereign hands, we need to require mortgagees, true owners of the mortgage charges to conduct all land receivership and repossession sales in the open market as they do elsewhere in Europe, writes Edmund Honohan. Well done, Edmund Honohan. Well done, the Irish Examiner. Any comments about the judicial system in Ireland, Mattie, before we throw this open and I invite folks like Seamus and Arno and Tony Lawler and others to Mike Malloy, Mark Bannister, Brian Riley to chip into the conversation with their thoughts. Mattie, what do you think about the judicial system in Ireland right now?
We had a minister some years ago for transport, and he was trying to change judicial legislation. He wanted judiciary appointed independently, and I supported him 100%. Shane Ross. I fought with him on other issues in transport, but he had a bill to try and have the final say on the appointment of judges with a lay group. And obviously there was some representative from the bar there and from Bar Council and from the judges themselves, but no, that was voted down because the appointment of judges is so political, politically naked by all the political parties and used and abused, and then when they're appointed, they're beholding, obviously. So we've a flawed, effed up system that is not going to give any justice to anyone. Indeed, I spoke to a man 2 nights ago in Dublin who had a battle in the courts, he's battling for years. Some of you know him, but he told me that he introduced, I can't think of the section, it's there where a case can be referred to Europe, and the judge just threw it out, and after it, he went back into court again and appealed it, and he's now allowed. And I criticise a lot from the EU, and rightly so, they deserve it. But some citizens have got recourse to justice by going to the EU. So our system is totally corrupt, totally.
Thank you. We applaud the straightness of your talking, Mattie McGrath TD, Tipperary. We're going to throw the conversation open to other folk here. So there's no particular logic to this running order. It's pretty much as it appears in the chat. So first of all,
can I kick it off?
Yeah,
Tony
please,
Lawler.
Tony, go for it. After Tony, we'll go to Seamus May. Tony, please do kick it off. Thank you, Tony. Cheers.
Right. First of all, I'm after listening very intently to Mattie. I've met Mattie on a number of occasions. And whereas I agree with everything that he's saying, I'd also have to be critical in a lot of respects. And just let me bring in this trinity that you're talking about, Andy, and bring it into reality. We had a situation in Ireland a number of years back, 2020 to be precise, where there was a piece of legislation introduced in the Dáil that effectively disturbed a 150-year-old principle with regards to hearsay being inadmissible in court proceedings. Now, if anybody listens to Judge Judy, she will turn around and I know this kind of trivializes it, but she don't listen to hearsay. Nobody listens to hearsay. But what did we have? We had an ex-Fianna Fail TD who is the boss man now with the Banking Federation, Brian Hayes, who goes lobbying the Minister for Justice, who both of them had a cosy relationship in Europe, and they bring in a piece of legislation based on a presumption in law that inadmissible information is now admissible in the case of a vulture fund who's looking to extract the debt from the particular individual. Now that follows the Burns decision. Now that's ridiculous to turn a 150-year-old principle on its head. That's the first thing that I would say. There was absolutely no resistance to that. It was shoved in on top of a public health act, shoved in somewhere in the legislation, and that's wrong. Now, I would say to Mattie, and I would lay down a challenge to Mattie, is Mattie aware of the post office scandal in England? Because there's a blueprint, the blueprint of all this corpocracy that Seamus May speaks so diligently about. There is a blueprint of that behaviour, and it's happening here under our noses. Now, Mattie used a word there a few minutes ago, and it actually stuck with me the minute he said it. He used the word lawlessness. Now, if there's lawlessness, so there's no law for the particular things that are happening in our courts, well, then I'd ask the question, why are our courts listening to it? If there's no law governing it, what gives the court jurisdiction to hear it?
Tony,
Like,
thank you for raising your points as strong as you have. It's much appreciated. Of course, you know, Mattie's not in a position to wave a magic wand and fix all this. The realities are that he's one of a small number of people in your parliament who are speaking up for the people who have been harmed in the way that they have. Mattie, before we go to our next person who's going to chip into the conversation, who'll be Seamus May, is there anything you'd like to say in response to what Tony has just said, Mattie? Thank you.
I didn't get his second name, first of all, but it doesn't matter. That's not here nor there. Look, it's a fair point. That was probably implemented during COVID when you mentioned emergency measures for health. I opposed, after the first week, I opposed every bit of those emergency legislation. So I obviously opposed that piece as well. And to do with hearsay or helping the vultures. Unless I was sound asleep or comatose or intoxicated or missing, I would oppose it because I've seen with too many. I've seen since the bailout, the crash, the way they've run amok. So I wouldn't be supporting any legislation. I haven't, and indeed I supported wholeheartedly Minister Ross's legislation to try and have the judiciary appointed independently because they're not independent by any shape, make, or form.
Thank you, Mattie. And Mattie, when the session, just before the session wraps up, I'm going to be putting a question to you, sir, which is going to be, what can we do to help you help us? Okay, so please give that some thought whilst we hear from the next person who's speaking. We're going to go to Seamus May next, then to Mark Bannister, then to Mike Malloy, then to Arno. Gentlemen, I'd like you all to be as succinct as possible. Forgive me, and also Brian Riley, of course. Be as succinct as you possibly can. So questions rather than speeches, if you like, that would be really helpful. But make your points as you wish to. Mr. Seamus May, you're next. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Andy, and thank you, Mattie, for joining today. And being, you know, you're one of the very, very few politicians over the last 30, 40 years that I've been hanging around that is acting in the public interest always. I don't have an awful lot to say because I spent about 15 years in courts fighting with the banks, and these banks were set upon me by CRH, the construction materials giant. They had directors on all of the banks. So I spent 15 years battling that. I had 3 orders of my arrest and imprisonment. We were thrown out of our house, all at the behest of CRH. And I then subsequently have spent over 28 and a half years in court suing CRH under competition law. So I'm not guessing, or I'm not maybe saying this is what I think is the case. I can tell you that the case is very simple. The judiciary is not separate. There's no separation of powers between the judiciary and the body politic. In situations where you're taking on a national champion, such as CRH or such as any of the banks. And I have gone through, as I say, 28 and a half years, every procedure possible. And all that the opposition, in our case CRH and its fellow defendants, they just need a 1% chance on any what do you call a procedure, and they win. So I got my ass kicked all of this time, and I'm afraid that the judiciary is, in relation to this case, in relation to this company, corrupt. And I have asked them on several occasions to refer laws to Europe to establish their compatibility with European law. This is Irish laws, and they have refused. They think Europe doesn't exist. So I'm sitting here now trying to figure out the way forward. And the way forward is very simple. I have to sue the state now because I've been thrown out and finished in the courts. But the problem with suing the state now is one thing is I have assets, I have my house and some land that I want to transfer onto my wife and son. But I have no guarantee that the state won't take my assets up if I go suing them. That is a huge, huge problem. After that, then I have no money, and third-party funding, as we know, is illegal in Ireland. And despite the fact that assignments should be legal in Ireland and really are, you won't get away with an assignment. It's almost impossible to assign your case. So, like, this justice system is there to protect the large corporations, and I mean the HSE, the government, various different arms of the state. It's there, and ordinary people cannot, unless they have a read stroke or look, or there's 1 in a million or something, but ordinary people cannot go through the courts. We have somebody joining us today. She's just down as iPhone. It's Jacinta Summers from Wexford, and Jacinta has been 12 years trying to get lawyers to sue CRH over the theft of 67 acres of land from her widowed mother's estate, and nobody will take them on. And they're using Arthur Cox, maybe not just the biggest law firm in Ireland, but certainly the most powerful. And they're more powerful than just lawyers. They are getting millions and millions from government every year for associated advices on this, that, and the other. So, like, I'm sorry now I went on a bit, Andy, but that's where I see after all these years. It's very sad.
Seamus, thank you very much indeed. We always appreciate your candid input to these conversations. You have a wealth of experience for us. Thank you very much, Seamus. Let's now go to Mr. Mark Bannister. Mark, if I can ask you to be as succinct as you can find yourself being, please. Thank you.
I'll be uncharacteristically so. Mattie, thank you for joining us. As you can tell, I'm English, so I'm a dispassionate observer of this, although horrified by it. I think everybody has identified the problems very clearly. So my question to you is simply this. I do not understand why the Irish public, when they get the opportunity for an election, do not vote these people out of office. Why haven't you? We in the whether you like them or loathe him, we have the Reform Party and Nigel Farage, and he is going through UK politics like a dose of salts. It's like everybody has taken the screw cap off a tiny little jar and has a huge dose of reality. And I want to understand why the Irish public are continuously voting the same people who have harmed them so hugely back into office. Could you offer some explanation? Because frankly, that's the solution. It's in your hands. You've got to vote for it.
Yeah, I could. I mean, look, I thought that the political party system has destroyed our country and the party whip. With Seamus May and like-minded others, I've gone through all this for the last, 14 years. I set about setting up an independent movement 2 years ago now, and I did, and with expertise like Seamus and others, and it was hijacked. And unfortunately, I was leader of the Rural Independents, and it was my own people who I thought were my allies. Was a church where it said, "Keep your enemies close," but my friends were closer still, and they went off and set up a political party where I was setting up an independent movement. So now they're part of the cabal. They're drawing down political funding. The electors had no choice in the last election. They had a choice of voting for the status quo. Many independents are voting for Sinn Féin, who had been an abject and utter abysmal failure in opposition in the previous 5 years. They just joined up with the government and with the EU, with the COVID regulations. If they brought, no matter what they brought in, Sinn Féin just said yes, while letting on to be in opposition. So we're kind of paralysed here. I don't know what was wrong with the electorate. First of all, we've less than 50% voting. which is a big problem. And second of all, with the media are so powerful, and unfortunately, people believe the media. It's in their heads. They're under a spell. The people are with this government, and I don't know. I'm going to try and make another attempt at that, but it's very, very disappointing because they elected the same government. And I've been criticised then for voting for Micheál Martin for Taoiseach and the day, but there was no one else up for Taoiseach. Sinn Féin didn't put up Dáil either. And you know what I mean? We had to form a government. As much as I loathe the man, it's probably a mistake I made, but look, anyway, I did it, and it's frustrating. I'm completely isolated now in the parliament, and I think that didn't happen by accident. That I haven't any a fraction of the time that I had in the last parliament, the last two parliaments, to raise all these issues. So they literally effectively silenced me. 80% definitely silenced me, and they're happy with that because they don't like what I say and what I think.
Thank you very much for a great question, Mark.
Something.
Thank you. Forgive me. I'm going to
Sorry. And can I say something to you?
in a short while, hopefully, if we do it. But please bear with me, Magella. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate your patience. We're going to go to Mike Malloy very quickly, Arno very quickly. I'm emphasising the very quickly, folks, and then we'll try and squeeze in Brian Riley and Magella Rippington as well. Mike Malloy, as the most succinct version you can of whatever you'd like to say. Thank you, Mike.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks, Mattie. So Mattie, my background is in international politics. So I suppose there's one key further pillar of the state that's missing, which is the unions. Now, obviously you represent the rural independents. I wonder whether the IFA, the number of farming families that are involved, the teaching unions, if we could pep up the unions more in this, and I don't know how much conversations there's been around that, but also having worked with politicians many times over the years, I know that if we could gather statistics on the number of constituents in their constituencies that are affected, they'd soon start to have meetings and be paying attention because they'd be worried about the next election. So I think we've got to really, your colleagues need to feel the heat under their proverbial in order to get them moving on this, because their self-interest has to become the fact that the vulture funds are a problem for them rather than something that they can just ignore. And the only way they'll do that is in their self-interest getting elected, which is if we can get better statistics on the constituents, and if we can get the unions to look at, because there must be a lot of farming families, there must be a lot of teaching families, there must be a lot of Garda families, etc., affected by this. So I'd love to look at that a bit more. And secondly, just to say, I've supported Brian very much as a friend and a colleague over the years, but I've had two very bad experiences with the state myself. One, during the COVID time, I represented the family carers, and it was an absolute nightmare trying to get the vaccination. And people have mentioned, I think Seamus mentioned the HSE. The HSE is, again, another part, unfortunately, the corrupt state. Secondly, Bank of Ireland, absolute nightmare over the past few months. They failed to freeze my mum's account upon her death, and then made me do a whole load of work and delayed getting any money as a result of that. So there's a complete institutional failure in Ireland, but I think we've got to look for solutions, and the unions have to be part of that, and then the international picture, and then potentially journalists that I know like John Snow, who I think would be interested in doing some work, and I've mentioned him before, and myself and Brian can have a look with that. So I suppose, Mattie, I'm here to help, and let's see what we can do. But yeah, let's focus on solutions. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I've said there.
Well, briefly, my thoughts are that the unions are part of the malaise as well. You mentioned IFA and ICMSA. They have done nothing for vulture families with the vultures. They're in bed with the government. They're in bed with the NGOs. It's a gravy. It's a pot. They're snouts in the trough, as Shane Ross said. I mean, the unions now are looking for. I'm a self-employed businessman for 4 hours as a politician. They're talking now about a 4-day week. This whole working from home is a disaster for our public service for getting work done. nothing is happening really. We've just gone into complete lacuna. But the unions, unfortunately, are part of the problem. When you saw Jack O'Connor and others in the money, and then the boards are on, and they're appointed chairs. See, the unions are great and are effective when they get into the talks with the government. And for some, whatever, they get the soup in and they forget about the people they represent. You talked about the Garda families. The Garda units have been destroyed with this present commissioner, and the system just crushed them. So we don't have trade unions that are worth their salt and will represent the families.
Thank you for raising that fourth dimension of this issue, Mike. And again, Mattie, thank you for your response. Folks, we're going to run over a little bit. And Mattie, let me know when you do need to go, because I'll squeeze that final question about what can we do to help you help us. But first of all, we're going to go, if I may please, to Arno. Arno is something of an expert when it comes to all kinds of issue matters. Arno, please do as short as you can. What to say? Thank you. And if we can't hear from Arno for some reason, we'll go to Mr. Brian Riley. 3, 2, 1. We're going to go to Mr. Brian Riley. Brian, over to
you. Thanks, Mattie.
Yes, yes, we can hear you now, Arno. Please carry on. Thank you.
Hi, Mattie. Thank you very much for joining us today. My full name is Arnaud Gauthier. I am a friend of Billy Fitzgerald, who could not attend the meeting today, who you may know from your constituency. We are launched the group Open Justice Ireland with many others. I am currently chairman. This group tend to encourage the scrutiny of the judicial process, and part of the conversation, which was the working democratic society and the separation of powers. There is no separation of power as long as the judiciary is politically nominated and can only be politically removed by a decision according to the Constitution by something which has never happened in 100 years of the creation of the state. My question to you, Mattie, is I have some judges who made a serious mistake made a serious mistake by putting a wrongful allegation in a judgment, and they refuse to correct their error, and I'm trying to get them removed from office. And my question is, I will need someone in the Dáil to act on having to step. We have the name of the reference of the act of the procedure of the Dáil to initiate the procedure to get a judge removed. This has not been initiated once in the States, and it is time, as someone else was saying, the judges have to feel the heat to do their job properly. If they sit comfortably unchallenged with full immunity and impunity, things are not going to change on that end. So that's my question to you, if you could help us on this hand.
Thank you. I do know Bill, yeah. He's a wonderful entrepreneur and a very bright guy. Certainly, as I said earlier, we're so disparate in groups, and there's so many different groups and organizations, but we need to come together under some umbrella. And there's an old saying here, the first thing happens in Ireland, you know, in a parish or anywhere, when there's something set up, there's always a split. Yes, I certainly will meet you and talk to you about asking those questions or whatever. I think maybe 1 or 2 judges have been forced off the bench. They weren't actually impeached, but they were going to be. And they made such a mess that they had to go. But you're right. The problem is they're politically appointed. And unless we're going to get a whole radical change in government, we're not going to have them politically unappointed or sacked or dismissed or retired or whatever word you want to cause. It's a terrible situation. And, you know, there's very little justice. So I will meet you and talk to you, certainly.
Oh, thank you, Mattie, for responding so positively to Arno's request for assistance on that. Well done, Arno. Great question with Mattie. Superb stuff. Mr. Brian Riley. After Brian, we're going to go to Magella. Brian, thank you.
Good afternoon, and hello, Mattie. Good to see you again. I've had to scrap half my notes here, so I'll stick to the short version of this, Mattie. I just want to compliment both yourself and Andy. Andy, obviously, for his own ongoing work, and yourself for all the efforts that you've made, but more importantly, for kicking off this series that we hope to build on which is a tremendous initiative. So well done on that. I want to echo some of the stuff you said, Mattie, about the media. You know, when Ed said strategic liars or described the vulture funds as that, there wasn't one word in a newspaper. When the McDonald report was launched, hardly a word in a newspaper, and so on and so on. And the same with Ed's opinion piece, with the exception of the Examiner. But I have a suggestion for you, and here's just let me say this. In a worsening housing crisis, with all of the implications of that, we still have the activities of the vulture funds, who continue to hound over 100,000 families with extortionate interest rates and repossession proceedings. So somewhere along the line, we need a debt amnesty and the state to step in and invite the vulture funds and the credit services to leave the country. So my proposition to you, Mattie, whether you can do it on your own or collectively, would be like they did in the UK in relation to the recognition of Palestine. Can somebody head up a proposal or a petition to tackle the vulture funds once and for all, and try and get as many TDs, sitting government TDs and opposition, to sign it for when the Dáil resumes? And great to see you. I leave that with you.
Yeah, really, because thank you very much, Brian, for all your work and your engagement with Ed to you for us. It's invaluable. Yes, certainly, I would be interested in that, and I talk to some like-minded TDs. But when you have the two big parties now in government together, with the support of Lowry, and incidentally, to make it clear, I'm not supporting them. I have voted with them maybe 15% of the time since the government was formed, but categorically opposed them and everything that needs to be opposed. And the measure I voted for them was what I thought would do some good. Certainly, but where are we going to get with it, Brian? We'll get the petition. We'll try and get as many as possible. It's an excellent idea. We have to think outside the box here. And that kind of a system, I see it there with the government. The vulture funds, they won't speak about them, but they will keep speaking about the REITs and the money investment. And we do need investment in housing, but they're the wrong vehicles for the investment. And we need to, I've called for, the VAT and charges on building a house now is over 40%. So if that was swept away in one clean sweep, and then allow people who can build houses, not to be penalised them, we would break through. I would have 10 couples, or at least 10, in my community here who have a site, their farmers, sons and daughters, are working, can get a mortgage, but can't get planning permission. So we need to get rid of the Antashkas as well, or rein them in, and all these sacred cows. The NGOs have to be disbanded as well. So we might export some of those as well as the vulture funds. Thank you.
Mattie, before we move on, and very briefly, you might encourage some of your friends, elected representatives, to link up with Andy and participate in this, because I'm looking forward to sharing the recorded version of this as soon as it's produced. And thanks again, Mattie, for participating.
And you might send me, if you can put a wording together for a petition for TDs to sign, certainly I'd be interested. Thank you.
Good man.
That's absolutely wonderful, Mattie. Absolutely wonderful. You know what, folks? When times are tough, that's when leadership comes to the surface. Mattie, your kind of leadership that you're displaying right now, the way that you responded to Brian Riley's question just now, is absolutely first class. It's exactly what we need. We're going to go to Magella, who's going to be the most succinct version of Magella that she can be. Magella. You need to unmute, please, Magella. Thank you. Please take yourself off mute if you'd like to. Come in, Magella. I can see you're trying to unmute yourself. While we're waiting for Magella, we're going to go to Niall.
Yes.
Go for it. You've done it. Thank you, Magella. As succinct as you can be. Thank you.
Okay, as quick as I can. First of all, thank you to you for, first time I've spoken to you. Thank you to you and Eddie for your interview. I want to thank you for your analogy of the Holy Trinity, which was really powerful and it really explained things very easily. And I shared that with so many people who were uninformed about what's going on in this country in relation to vulture funds. Just to say, I want to echo a lot of what Brian has said, because I was going to just say we need to harness Mattie with more power and the power of the people. And we need to take a lead too from Mary Robinson, who has said truth to power. We need to look at our rule of law, and we need to address why we have no separation of powers in this country. I've experienced it over 15 years in the courts myself. I would like to just say, it crossed my mind that Mattie will need, and Ed Honahan need a lot of support. I have gone to TDs locally, I won't say who they are, and I have questioned them in depth. Why aren't you listening to Mattie? Why didn't you listen to his thing in the Dáil? Why are we not getting, what have you got to say to me about it? And I just got hushed up. No, you don't listen to Eddie. No, you don't listen to Mattie, and just dispelled them and just disposed of them. And I also saw RTE do it on a news bulletin where they had gone to leaders' questions. There was 4 or 5 key issues raised. Mattie raised the most important one, the vulture funds. And they went back to the panel in the studio and quickly spoke in depth about each of the issues, and then finished up by saying, oh, Mattie McGrath raised a question about vulture funds, as if he had just asked for a glass of water and it was unimportant. And we have to undo why this is unimportant. We have 26 counties here in the Republic of Ireland. It would not be difficult to get one public representative in each county so that we can start informing the public in each of those counties. Maybe do it on a national day, a meeting in every county on a specific day. But we need to find a way to harness Mattie. And I think 100,000 signatures would do a lot. One lady, an activist, is talking about getting 100,000 signatures to dissolve the Dáil. Not saying that that's the way to go, but we do need to harness the power of the people. We're not doing that. And one of the reasons, just to answer a question, why I think the public are continuously voting in the same people: 1, they're not informed; 2, the parties are buying back the votes. They went out and they targeted the pensioners, because we have a high pension rate in this country, a high number of pensioners, and they offered them an increase that they couldn't turn away from. And they go out and they target vulnerable people to get their votes, and that is not helpful, and it's not good for democracy. But so that's really all I would have to say. But I would support and echo what Brian said. I don't want to hold the meeting up any further, but we have one of the strengths that we have is we have great people on board who are key players, and if we can just harness all of those key players, we can get out of this problem. Because what has not been spoken about is debt purchase is a big investment spinner right across Europe. Globally, they're investing in residential property and they're investing in the tourist industry, and we're up against something so powerful, such as investment in debt. And the debt has been created, pushing people into higher interest rates. They're going to default, become delinquent in their loans, and the vulture funds are here in this country to stay, and we're not recognising that.
Magella, thank you very much indeed. You've made some very powerful points, Magella, for which we're all very grateful. Mattie, if I may, I'm going to ask Niall Quinn to squeeze in one very quick question, Niall. One very quick question or comment, please, Niall. Go for it. Thank you, sir.
I'm there now, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for everybody being on. It's brilliant. I had a few questions there, but essentially, I suppose at the moment, I have a receiver trying to auction off my home with people in it, and they said they'd put it up for auction in the middle of August. So I've been talking to Brian Riley, and we're trying to go through mis-selling and trying to find a new pathway to find fair play. I suppose the bigger question is, Mattie, if you were Micheál Martin, what would you do to level the playing field for normal progressive families? And the other thing I see for my own children, I have 4 sons. Most of them probably won't end up living in Ireland. But what we have now, instead of a credit system, we have a systematic toxic banking system akin to a pyramid scheme that if you get a loan with the way it's set up, you're nearly going to end up dealing with a receiver, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you do. And I suppose the final thing is there any scenario, Mattie, that you can see that will mobilise people and get fair-minded people connecting with this reality that no matter how hard you work, no matter how hard you do, you're on a slippery slope, and it's the system is nearly designed at the moment between judiciary and finances and politicians. It's nearly designed for the ordinary family to end up worse off than when they started 20 years previously. So if you can, I turned up to the McDonald report review, and there's very little that I can actually do, but people, like-minded people like me who are out working every day, if they come together, and there's lots of us, and there's lots of your colleague TDs who have pulled together different lobby groups. So people aren't tone deaf to fair play, but if there was any type of scenario out there that vulture funds are in charge, or a political party say we've no control of them, like I love your phrase "run amok." It's very, very brave phrase, because they have run amok, and we don't know what that, there's no limit on them. You know what I mean? There is no limit on them. So that's probably what I'm trying to say to you is there any form of words or any petition or any type of scenario that would mobilize people into reacting and getting a wish list for you? Because sometimes I think a bit of perspective, I think we're all on the right journey here. But if you had a little wish list as to how we should make change, if you had that magic wand, that it's great to see you on. We know you don't have it, but if you did have it, what would it be? Brian Riley has done great work over the past couple of years, but we seem to be shooting stars as opposed to aiming for the dream. And my dream is that my sons can actually live in Ireland and work and own their own homes and raise their own.
Thank you very much indeed for your contribution to the conversation. It's much appreciated. It really is. Mattie, I'm going to pass back to yourself here. Please do respond to anything that Niall just spoke about, or Magella, or anybody prior to that. But also, please respond to my question to you, sir, which is, what can we do to help you help us? Thank you, Mattie McGrath.
Right, and just go back to Magella first of all. She's dead right in what she said. They do an election with a willing media, and the social media. They put out these carrots to older people. They have really skillful at this with the different referenda, except for the last referenda. They dangled all these things in front of an older generation and got the other people who vote, mind you. So I came to the conclusion after the last election, when we didn't get a massive change, which I thought we would, first of all, we have to encourage the other 50% that don't vote, plus 50% plus, to try and get them to vote. We can't change without 50% people engaging and getting on the pitch. And the other problem is, a massive problem is, we take the cohort of the political classes, the public servant classes, and the NGOs. That's enormous. And I'd say that counts for 40% of the vote. They're going to vote for the status quo because they're benefiting from it. They're all under the big tree, and they're getting the fruit of it. They're all involved. And it's so big now. And with the whole situation now regarding Dáil there, it was a businessman, was so busy, anyone in business, trying to keep afloat, that we can't even think who we might vote for, or we can't get involved in an organisation because we're snowed under with bureaucracy. And all that bureaucracy has been enabled by all these NGOs and different agencies with directors and heads and CEOs. And it's all coming from the taxpayer. And also we have a complete bust up, and financially nothing's going to change because they're all under this tree on the gravy train, and their families are in it. And that leaves the other 25-30% who are trying to be the entrepreneurs and employers and ordinary people working in jobs. And they're so busy that they can't, like, the cost of living is killing them. The insurance costs, like, with the second most expensive country in Europe, everything is there. It's a lethal cocktail of what's bad. And we need visionaries and we don't have them. And the system has, they've just put, I said it 100 times in the Dáil, the senior public servants have the fingers around the handlebars of the bike and they won't take them off. You need a jackhammer. I've said, I'm on record saying that. They're running the show. It's Yes Minister with the ministers. Since Charlie Haughey went like him or lump him, he was the only one that directed the officials what to do. Now the officials and the NGOs are directing the government, and the whole thing is tainted and corrupted. And that so many of them are happy with the status quo. It's going to take a mighty change to change them, and then to enable the people that are just want to do their work, pay their mortgages, carry on, raise their family, educate them. So sadly for exports, it's shocking. And when I meet people, and I do often enough this time of year, come back from America, Canada, I met someone from Chicago yesterday, and they can go out there and set up a business and make a living like we could do here in Ireland 40 years ago, and make a bit of a profit. And that's not a horrible word. But you can't do that in Ireland anymore because it's all been sucked off, it's siphoned off. regulations are just gone over the top completely. And then you find there's no justice. You've regulators now for everything. They have brass plates on the walls of the business. They have fancy furniture. They have nice titles, big wages, and they're not regulating anything. If there was, sure, the scandal in the concrete industry, the scandal in the mica, and the scandal with insurance costs, and I could go on forever. It's all a system, and you'll find like the Brian Hayeses and not Paul Keogh, the Keogh man from Wexford. And that's happening as well. There must be a moratorium put in there if you're in public office that you can't be involved in this for at least 10 years. Because they're going from public office straight into lobbyists. And I have a TD who lost his election in the last election, was very disappointed when I didn't meet him there before the brawl broke up. He's now a lobbyist. Same with the HSE. That's been farmed out to work. There's people working the HSE today, many of them senior people, and they've set up companies and they're providing care for the HSE. And we see with scandals in the Children's Health Ireland and all, the system is completely corrupt and tainted. And how we're going to change it, I'm all open to listen to people and meet people, but the people that were probably targeted and asking are too busy trying to keep their businesses afloat and to keep bread and keep food on the table. And the system has us where we want. It's a communist system in many ways, control, except that they're one half of them creaming it off and the rest of us are just minions.
Mattie McGrath, we salute what you've been saying to us, sir. We really, really do. I'm going to finish this session with direct reference to a quotation. But before I go to the quotation, I want to repeat what I just said. Mattie McGrath, we salute what you've been saying to us, sir. Thank you very much indeed for setting aside some time for this conversation. Your leadership in being the first one of the people speaking at these events, and hopefully your leadership in championing the letter that will be circulated to all the TDs demanding change is exactly what's needed. Folks, I'm going to finish the session by making reference to a quotation here. I'm going to read it out nice and loud because I believe it's true and I believe it's powerful and I believe it's fitting for the moment, even though it's from the 1960s. Robert F. Kennedy said, "Every time we turn our heads the other way, when we see the law flouted, when we tolerate what we know to be wrong, when we close our eyes and ears to the corrupt because we are too busy or too frightened, when we fail to speak up and speak out, we strike a blow against freedom and decency and justice." Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot wrong with things happening in Ireland, as there is in the UK, around all of these issues connected to vulture funds. What is necessary is for we, the people, to find a way to work together and to give our absolute support and commitment to our elected representatives, people like Mattie McGrath, who are willing to speak up and speak out, to lead, to demand change, to not accept the status quo, and to make the world a better place, because we deserve it. We live in a parliamentary democracy, people. That applies to the UK. It also applies to Ireland. Let's make sure our countries behave like parliamentary democracies. Can you please join me in thanking Mattie McGrath TD? Thank you very much indeed, Mattie. Thank you very, very much indeed.
I'm delighted.